If you look under the Effect menu, you'll see that Audacity has no shortage of effects and filters you can apply to your projects. I'm not going to go into every single one here, but in this movie, I would like to show you a few of the effects that I think you'll find to be the most useful most frequently. I've opened up the file called Music Bed No Fade from the Exercise Files folder, but if you don't have access to the exercise files, you can open any audio file you have if you want to work along with me. Now, in the previous video, we looked at the Envelope tool, which allows you to automate the volume of tracks. And I mentioned that you can't use the Envelope tool to create complete fade-ins or fade-outs because it can't take the audio level all the way down to nothing. If you want to create a fade, you have to use the fade effects. Let's listen to the end of this track. So that just kind of ends abruptly. It'll sound much better with a fade out. Now, as with just about all edits, before I can apply an effect, I need to first select the area that I want to affect. I'm going to select from about the 1 minute 15 second mark all the way to the end, because if I didn't make a selection, Audacity would start fading the song from the very beginning of the track. Now I'll go to Effect, and I'll choose Fade Out. And that's all there is to it. There are no parameters or other options to set. But you can see the fade has been added just by looking at the waveform. I'm actually seeing a bit of a problem with this fade though, and maybe you do too. Let's listen. So that definitely faded, but I could still hear the original abrupt ending of the song, but just at a lower volume. That's because this audio track includes a second or two of silence here at the end. And because I included that in my selection, Audacity included that time in the fade calculation. It doesn't reach silence until the very end of the selected area. And by that time, the actual ending of the song has already happened. So I'm going to undo that. And this time I'm going to chop off the tail end of this track. And in this case, I don't really care that I'm including a little bit of the waveform itself, because I want to chop that off and it's going to fade anyway. So I'll hit delete. And now we have a really abrupt ending. But now I can select the end and apply the fade out once more. And again, I want to make sure I select just at the very end. You can see it sort of snapping into place there. If I drag past that, that portion will be included in the fade out calculation, and I'll have the same problem all over again. So I'm going to make sure that lines up to the end. I'll come back up to the Effect menu. And here I can actually choose Repeat Fade Out or press Command or Control R, because Audacity always remembers the last effect I applied. And there it is. Let's give that a listen. And that fade sounds much better now. And the same applies for the fade in effect. I can just select a portion at the beginning of the song, or anywhere else for that matter if I wanted the song to suddenly drop out and fade back in, and then apply Effect, Fade In. And we now have this. And I'll just undo that. So those are the fade in and fade out effects. Now, it would be nice if there were a way to control the attack of the fades. In many other audio editing apps, you can choose how quickly or gradually a fade occurs within a given time. But as you just saw, there are no settings for the fade effects here in Audacity. But one way around this is to combine the Envelope tool with the fade effect. Let's come back over to the end of the song. Now, I just mentioned that you can't use the Envelope tool to create a fade because it doesn't take the audio down to absolute silence. But you can combine the Envelope tool with a fade to get more control over that fade. So I can select the Envelope tool and add some control points. Maybe here at the end I'll click there, and then I can add a second control point to adjust the fade. So if I want it to be more gradual, I can drag it out like this. If I want it to happen more abruptly, I can drag it back in like this. And I can just choose how I want that fade to occur. Maybe something like that. And now it sounds like this. So that's just a way around the limited fade controls here on Audacity. Alright, so another filter that comes in very handy is the Amplify effect. This one can be used if you're editing a talk or an interview and find that some portions of the track are quieter than others. Maybe the microphone was moved at some point, or maybe the person talking just moved away from the microphone, or even just started speaking more softly. I'm going to open up another file from my exercise files folder, interview_low, and I'll make a copy of that to edit in Audacity. And this track has a bit of audio that's just a little bit too quiet for my tastes.
1 minute from a giant shopping center, and you would never even know that it was here. Once you're out on the farm, you just feel like you're in some rural area. So that's the best of...
So just shortly after the 20-second mark, the audio drops a little lower than I'd like. Basically this section right here. So let's select that. And this is what it sounds like currently.
Once you're out on the farm, you just feel like you're in some rural area.
And I'll go to Effect, Amplify. So all you do here is figure out by how many decibels you want to increase or possibly decrease the selected audio. It's something you'll have to play around with by trying out a setting, seeing if it works, and if it doesn't, undoing it, and then adjusting the amount of amplification. I'll go with the default setting here and see what that sounds like. And I can see right away that this is going to be too loud. Probably don't even need to listen to it, but just so you can hear what it sounds like.
And you would never even know that it was here. Once you're out on the...
So that's too dramatic a change for this example. I'm going to undo that. And we'll go back to Effect, Amplify. To try a lower setting. And let's drag this down to make it a little less dramatic. Maybe right about there. I'll click OK. So just by looking at the waveform, I can see it's now probably more in line with the stuff that comes around it. Let's go back.
About 1 minute from a giant shopping center, and you would never even know that it was here. Once you're out on the farm, you just feel like you're in some rural area. So that's the best of both worlds for me.
And that sounds much better. Now, even though we do have the ability to adjust the settings of this effect, it's still a pretty abrupt effect. Once you apply it, the selected area instantly jumps up or down to the dB level you specified. If you want a more gradual ramping up, you can again try using the envelope tool to draw in control points for the volume. Also, let's select Amplify again. And notice there's a preview button here, which allows you to hear what the change is going to sound like before you apply it.
Once you're out on the farm, you just feel like you're in some rural area.
That way you don't have to apply and undo the effect several times to get close to the level you want. Now we can't see the waveform change, but you can just tell by listening that that's probably too loud, and in this case I would probably drag it down and preview it again.
Once you're out on the farm, you just feel like you're in some rural area.
And once I think I'm pretty close to where I need it to be, I can click OK and see how the waveform looks compared to the rest of the track. There's also a Manage button here, which allows you to save the settings you've chosen as a preset. So if, for example, you have several recordings that you know all need to be bumped up to 3.5 dB, you can just save a 3.5 dB setting and select it from this menu, instead of having to manually enter that value every time you need it. You'll find that many of the effects in Audacity give you the option to save settings as presets. I'm just going to cancel this for now. All right, another effect I want to show you is one that can be really useful if you're a musician trying to learn a song. A lot of people play by ear and learn by listening to music, but sometimes the parts you're trying to learn go by too fast. Let's go back to that music trackbed again. I'm going to make sure nothing is selected, because I want this effect to apply to the entire track. And I'm going to choose Effect, Change Tempo. This is an effect that lets you slow down or speed up a song without changing the pitch, meaning you can learn the song in the original key at a slower speed. For example, I'll slow this down to about 25% of the original speed. I'll click OK, and let's listen. So the song is still in the same key but slowed down, and the individual parts are now easier to hear. You might even want to apply this effect to spoken words if you're having trouble figuring out what the speaker is saying. I'll undo that with Command or Control Z. So changing the tempo is a different effect than changing the speed, which can also slow down or speed up the song, but using the change speed effect will actually change the pitch. So maybe I'll pop this up to 25% speed difference. I'll click OK. And you can see the waveform actually got shorter because I sped up the entire song. And the key has also changed. Again, we'll undo that. And there's also a change pitch filter, which keeps the track at the same speed, but allows you to increase or decrease the pitch. You can use this effect if you want to create a chipmunk voice or maybe a monster voice. I'll go back to the interview track again. And I'll choose Effect. And I'll click to deselect and go to Effect, Change Pitch. I'll pitch that up 20%. And we get this.
Well, we have one farm in Ojai where we've been since 1998.
I'll undo that. And of course we can go in the other direction. Now I'm going to choose Effect, Change Pitch again instead of repeat change pitch. Because anytime you use the repeat command, that will apply the exact same settings you just applied. I want to change my settings in this case, so I'm going to go back and choose change pitch. And maybe I'll pop that down to -25. Again, notice the length of the clip stays exactly the same, but now we've pitched it down.
Well, we have one farm in Ojai where we've been since 1998.
All right, so there you have a handful of the many effects that are available in Audacity. We'll be using a couple more of them in upcoming videos, but a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory or easy to figure out once you've played around with them. Now, one word of warning, these are all what are known as destructive effects, meaning applying them can permanently change your audio file. Yes, you can undo changes like I've been doing here throughout this video, but if you save and close your file, there's no way to go back to the original version. So I highly suggest making copies of any audio files you intend on applying effects to, or at least creating duplicates on separate tracks within the same project, so you always have a backup copy in case you really mess up your file. And if you recall, it's very easy to make a duplicate. Just make sure your track is selected and go to Edit, Duplicate. And that'll give you a copy of the track you can play around with, so you can feel free to play around with all the effects to see what they do without harming your original track.